Good morning, everybody. We are going to be continuing on our studies of Eruvin. Today, we are going to be doing Tet Zayin Amud Aleph. So first, we have the last couple words on Tet Vav Amud Bet. We were discussing about a caravan and how it would make its walls for Shabbos versus Eruv. So Tashma on the bottom of Tet Zayin Amud Aleph. Sorry, Tet Vav Amud Bet on Tet Zayin Amud Aleph is where we are right now. So Tashma. Shiara shachanta bebika v'kiflo b'gmalim b'chafot b'avitin b'shlefin b'kanim b'kolchot taltalim b'tocha v'vad shlo yehei ben gamal gamal kamo gamal ben okaf l'okaf kamo okaf ben avit lavit kamo avit. Okay, so now there's a lot of terms here, which here I'll explain it using a picture actually. So here we go. So this is we've got a right. So we have a caravan, and these are all the things that a caravan would often have with them. So let's talk about each of them. Right. So first we've got there. So now it's time for Shabbos, and they want to make the camp. So what they do is they camp in a valley because that's a safe place to camp for Shabbos, and then they surrounded themselves with what they laid down. They had the camels sit down. So that's the living thing as part of the wall. Then we have the ukafot, which is their saddles, which you see, you see that's the bet in the diagram. And then next to that they had the avitin, which is the cushions, which you see, like if we're going to go around the circle, followed by the shlifin, which is the wheat sheaves, which is basically the it's these packs of wheat that they would eat. Then we have kanim, which are boards, and kolchot, which are stalks. So you see it goes around. You see that they unpack their right. So the board. I mean, there's no picture of the boards here, but you see the kanim, but you see the kolchot over here. That's hay, although like either the bundle here or standing up, right? So those are the various things that they basically unpacked all of their wares, everything they had, and they circled themselves with it. So, right, and in order for this to work, the important thing is that you have majority of the area being enclosed, right? That's why you can't have the gap between the different walls being more than what the walls are made of themselves. So between each camel, the limit is the camel width. Between the saddles, again, you can only have saddle length width, and between the avit, which is like the cushions or the seats you put on it, this is the same thing, the same limit. Okay, so hakanami. So now we're saying so now we're back to the question. So in that case, doesn't that support our question of does the breach have to be equal or slightly less than equal? So we say no. So we say hakanami kishenech. Now there too, it's not considered to be a case proving for exactly one way or the other way, because if we say here it's basically since you can remove and put back the the various items, so that means that there must be a little bit more than with the item itself. So you can't say it's exactly equal. So we still don't know the case if you have exactly the same amount of things standing versus not standing, what the case would be. So now we're going to try again to figure out what it is. So Tashma, Nimtzerata Omer Shlosh Midot Mechita. So let's say, so now it seems that there are three different types of measurements that are relevant for when we're talking about walls. Kol Shu Pachot Mishlosha. So things that are less than 3. Sarich Shehei Ben Zelzet Shelo Yehei Ben Zelzet Shalosh Kedei Shelo Yizdaker Hagdi Bevat Rosh. So, right. So there's 3 measures. So what now? So what? So the first one is the case of lavud, right? So if we have a gap between things, has to be, right? The gap is less than 3, right? So we're talking about in that case that if the gap is more than 3 for the case of lavud, right? That's what this whole case is about, and that's such as the size that a goat will be able to jump through it. That's a problem. So here it's saying that you make sure that it has to be, the gap has to, if the gap is less than 3, right? So that's where you can apply limit. That's one type of measurement that's relevant. One size. Okay. The next one is kol shu shlosha u'mishlosha ad arba. Right. So the next, right. So again, so here now we're looking at the bottom here. We're talking about the right. So we're talking about, so all these cases are cases where we have various sets of boards lined up. So the first right. So we're talking about the kid goat jumping on through because your gap is too big. That's diagram number 224. And now moving on to the next case is between 3 and 4 is the next diagram 25. That started shlo yehei ben zeh lezeh kimlo'o kedei shlo yehei parutz ka'omed v'im haya parutz urba ha'omed av keneged ha'omed asur. So now we're stating that in the region between 3 and 4 tvachim wide, so you need to make sure that it's majority. Right, so now we can apply. So, right, so now you have each board is sufficiently wide. Right, the boards are between 3 and 4, so they themselves in theory could be a standalone area. Right, we're not applying level to cover up the gaps in this case. But in this case, you still have to be careful of not having more open than it is than is closed. Because once you have more in the parts, the breach, and the open than in the standing, then the problem is that even the wall, the beam, the various slats that are currently standing that are between 3 and 4 tvachim, they're as if they're not even there. So you're probably asking, what exactly does that mean? So we'll explain it by using the next one. Okay, explain what do you mean by carrying across from it. So we'll see that in just a second. So kol shu arba'a u'me'arba'a ad 10 amot. If anything is 4 tvachim wide until 10 amot wide, so you can't have a gap between it and the next area. It's more than it is. Because you can't have to be that majority is open and in breach as opposed to standing there with an actual wall. But if they're exactly the same, but if they're exactly the same, meaning once you have a board or wall of 4, and then you have a gap that's exactly equal in size, so corresponding to what's standing, right? That's considered to be a wall. So we see here in the number 210, right? So if let's say you have you have this and you have big gaps, so what happens is each individual, we don't have a continuous wall anymore. The gaps are too big, but behind each and every wall would be considered to be a valid differentiation. So for purposes, we say mutar versus us. Like, so can I get hamamed mutar? Can I get parts of source? We're talking about in kilayim that if you wanted to plant on the other side of it, so since the wall, you no longer have a full halachic wall running length, all you have is each individual small wall of the area between 4 and 10 and 4 tvachim and 10 amot. So exactly where the wall differentiates, you have a wall, but the gaps in between are no longer considered to be filled in because it's not considered to be a full valid wall.
Sorry, Rabbi, that's when the gap is more than 3 tvachim?
This is when the gap is equal or larger than the wall itself.
But does it matter how wide the gap is?
Yes, if the gap is even no matter how big the gap is, once the gap is beyond the allowed gap length, the wall, everything, the wall that's at least 4 tvachim wide, it's considered to be a valid freestanding wall, irrelevant to everything else around it. So that would mean that both sides on both sides. You can plant different seeds or trees for the purpose of kilayim. So that's all. That answers the question.
I think so.
Okay. But if we have majority of the walls, I mean, there's more walls overall on that whole side standing, or on the whole enclosure, depending on what you're trying to do. I've kind of got a parutz mutar. But if, let's say, the majority of it is closed in general, then that would mean that, assuming that none of the the breaches are too large, then you could even plant corresponding to the breach, as seen in here. We're still within diagram number 226. This means that if it's supposed to be exactly even, or being a little too much of a gap. Instead, if we had the walls were a little bit larger, and overall there's mostly wall, that would mean that now you plant on the entirety of both sides of the wall. Different things. Without worrying about running into kilayim issues, because this would be a sufficient wall. Okay, so we're using that to try and determine about the case of 50-50. Okay, so now when we continue with the last case, we asked, is there a limit? Joel asked that, so we're going to answer. The Gemara is answering his question right now. If the breach is more than 10, then it forbids that area. Hayusham kanim hadokranim v'oselahen pe'ah milmala afilu biyoter me'eser mutar. So if the gap is more than 10, then it's a problem because it's considered to be a breach. But if there were pointed stakes in the ground, then all you had to do is put a braid on top of them, and then even if it was larger than 10, it would be fine, because that means that let's say here, this looks like they put some sort of string or twine on top here. So assuming you did that, right? So once you did that, now this becomes a sort of petach, and then we get we gain a lot more in terms of the distance. Okay. So now we're going to be examining that large Tosefta we just quoted. So Tani miyat reisha mishlosha vad arba. So in the first case, we're talking about between 3 and 4, right? That's 220. Picture 225. So in that case, so and there we say that between the area between 3 tzachim and 4 tzachim, as long as it's not the difference between the two is exactly the same, which would mean that if it's exact, it's a problem, and it's a question against Rav Papa. Amar l'char Rav Papa, mine bluo nich nas biyotze. No, so we'll have the same as we said before. When we say miluo, we're saying it's if it's a little bit more than that, because it's as if you could have put in the exact same thing at the same time and pulled it out. And in order for that to be the case, there has to be a little bit more than that exact width. And this also you can infer from other parts of the Tosefta. The case where it's majority in breach. Av keneged ha'omed asur. Ha'omed mutar. Ramina. So let's try another way. So if the breach is more than that which is standing, then even again, this is in the case 2, 3, and 4. Then even the place where it is standing is asur. But that would imply that if it was exactly the same amount in breach, then it should be mutar to carry the whole in the whole area. Therefore, if it's equal, that means if there is exactly equal breach to the place that's to what's standing, then we should be fine. Right? That's the proof from there. So okay. So laymat. Right. So then therefore we can prove Rav Papa then based on this. So laymat to have it chiyuv to Rahuna breder Yeshua. Then shouldn't we? Right. So then shouldn't we say that this thing is directly in support of Rav Papa and against Rahuna, who says that it would be no good. So it says that it's good. So Amar Lach Then according to you, we've got a problem with the last part of the Tosefta. If there was more standing than there is in breach, then even according to the breach is mutar. Also then implies that if they were exactly the same, then it would be usher to carry according to the breach, which would mean that it's like me, that when it's exactly the same, then you can't carry. So then we've got a problem, because now Seifa Kashel or Papa, Reja Kashel or Rav Yoshua. So now we have the first half is difficult for a Papa, the last half is difficult for a Papa, and the first half is difficult for Rav Yoshua. So now we're going to try and fix that. So Seifa Rav Papa Lo Kasha. So the latter half, quarter Papa, isn't a problem. Id Titana Reisha Parat Rubal made. So Seifa can solve as follows. Since in the beginning, half of the statement, the former clause, it says the Parat Rubal made, that it is more in breach than that is standing. Therefore, it parallels language and Tana Seifa Omed Rubal Parat. So that's why the Seifa says standing more so than the breach. So that it's not necessarily to teach. So that would mean that the same halacha applies in the latter case as the former case, and that therefore it supports me. And that's why the language is parallel, not for the diuk that Rav Yeshua was trying to say. Rachel Rav Huna Rav Yeshua Lokasha. So Rav Huna can have a similar support for it to explain why the first half is as it says. I didn't advise make Seifa Omen Berubal Parot. Tanaresha Parot Berubal made. So he says no, it's the other way around. Is that the real case is the real case we're learning from is the latter half of the Tosefta, and then for the Resha is simply paralleling the latter half. So therefore that's why it's imprecise. But really, the latter and the former case are the same. So Bishlama. So now we're going to try and see who's really right. So Bishlama or Papa Mishum Haki Lo Arav Lahu B'Tanilu. This works according to Rav Papa, who allows you to who say that you're allowed to carry in the case where they're equal, because he simply says that why in that case couldn't you carry? Because right, because that's sufficient. That parallel language is enough of a reason why he taught in two separate clauses, right? So that's why it's separate. Rav Yeshua, Eruvin Breder Rav Yeshua, Eruvin who knew, but according to Rav Yeshua, why didn't it simply teach it in one statement? Why did it break it in half? Kol shehu pachot mishlosha. Anything that's less than 3 and 3. Should have simply said, if it's both cases saying that it would be no good, it simply should have said, if any time when the board itself, when the things you're making your wall out of are less than 3 tvachim wide, or even 3 tvachim wide, then there should be no difference between the two of them. And then that'll be it. So why didn't it simply stated? Why did it say formulate in two different ways? So mishum delo dami psul l'reishel psul d'sef. No, because the reason why it's so good in the first part of the Tosefta versus the latter part of the Tosefta is different. The problem in the first part is kadesh lo yizaker hagdiv b'vat achad. Right? No, there's two different reasons for each psul. That's why it has to state, even though it sounds like it's the same svara, but it's not. Because the first time when we're saying why it's no good, it's because of shaloy zakir k'div v'atachad. So that the kid goat, right? Diagram number 224. We're worried about that guy getting on through. But on the other hand, psul d'seifa. But in the latter half, why is the enclosure no good? Shaloy hey parut ka'omei. So that you don't have the breach being equal to that which is standing. So now we've established actually that we can't determine on the equivalent case based on whether it's based on that Tosefta. So now we're going to try figuring something else out. So try to explain a little bit more about this Tosefta, which tells us a lot about the laws of lavud and walls and how much is standing versus not standing. So, okay, so now Pako Mishlosh Shamani. So who's the opinion we're talking about when it's less than where the breach is less than 3? Rabbanan he. This is the opinion of the Rabbanan. The Amri Pako Mishlosha Amrin Lavud. Because the opinion of the Rabbanan says it's less than 3, you can say Lavud. Shlosha Lo Amrin Lavud. But if it says less than 3 is Lavud, 3 or more. But yeah, you can't say Lavud anymore. So, Emasefa Kol Shu Shlosha Mishlosha Vad Arba. All right, so then why don't so why didn't it say whatever it is 3 and then it's 3 until 4? So then it should have right. So but if that's the case, then why are you talking about the case between 3 and 4? Because according to the Rabbanan, there's none. Because for the case of 4, it appears to be the for Kol Rabbanan, there's less than 3 is lavud and more than that is no good. So there's no interim case of 3 to 4. So here Rabbanan mishlosha v'arba shlosha v'arba chadhu. They're saying the whole region between 3 and 4 is all considered to be no good for the Rabbanan. So there's no such thing as the exact why would you be talking about from 3 and then 3 plus to 4? Seems to be the language seems to be imprecise. It's actually Rabbanan's opinion. So is it really all Rabbanan's opinion? So Amar Abaye, Midrash Rabbanan Sifan Amar Rabbanan. Right. So Beit says if the first part is the Rabbanan, the so too is the latter half of the Breita. So Umodu Rabbanan the Kol Mishrei Kinegdo. So and the Rabbanan agreed to allow that which is standing across from it. I'ika makom arba chashiv v'ilo lo chashiv. Right. So we talked about before about about the freestanding wall. So the Rabbanan agreed that if the case is that you're right between 3 and 4, the Rabbanan don't really have an opinion. But if it's 4, right? So there's 3. There's 3 half parts of the statement. There's from the 0 to 3 cases, the 3 to 4 cases, and the 4 to 10 cases. So the 0 to 3 is according to the Rabbanan, and the 4 to 10 is according to Rabbanan, because Rabbanan also agree that if it's 4 tvachim until 10 amot, that is considered to be a wall. But if it doesn't hit that, then it's not considered to be a wall. So correct. So on the other hand, so that's one way to explain it. The entirety of the Tosefta follows the Rabbanan. But now Rav is coming in and arguing with Abaye and says, since the latter half is talking about Rosh Shimon Gamliel, so too for the first half. So we know that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion is that lavud is 4, and the only case where he says 3 is when it's the case of Gedim Balkan, which would work very well for him because in the latter part of the Tosefta that's talking about from 4 till 10, which sounds like his opinion, and it also we as we discussed a couple days ago that that he also says the case of when it's towards the ground that Yedim Balkan still applies. So he still has a concept of 3. So maybe the whole thing's according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So now we're trying to figure out who is it in accordance with. Tashma. So a wall that is made of a majority of windows of entrances and windows is you're allowed to carry it in. But the only thing to be careful of is that there's more walls than there is empty space. So, right. So now we're back to where before we dealt with the Tosefta and everything about the Tosefta. Now we're trying to figure out the issue with the size of the gaps. So, Sharuban Sakadadech. Wait, so what do you mean by what do you does it really mean majority? Ella Shariba Behem Tachim Chalonot Mutar Uvad Shehei Omed Meruba Al Parot. So when it says majority, what does it mean to say? Is it really a case where the majority isn't actually standing? Rather, it means that even if there's many windows and entryways, as long as majority is standing, is considered to be is standing versus parot, that's what matters. So that's majority. Haka parot asur. But if it was exactly the same, it'll be a problem. You have to do papa shifta, which means that papa's wrong, because we're here saying that exactly is no good. He'll look about to do papa, and so as in, right? So now this disagrees, and then the Gemara continues. He'll talk about to papa yet, and the halacha is like papa. So now Gemara's like shifta. Wait, didn't we just? How can we just refute it and then conclude like Rav Papa? Like, how does that work? In mishum d'daikim anitin kavate. Right, you're right. This Tosafta that we just quoted goes against him. But why do we still follow him anyways? Because there's a Mishnah that supports him. Titnan, who said and learned in the Mishnah, Lo yu pratzot al binyan, haka binyan mutar. Because there's another Mishnah that states that you shouldn't have more breaches than there are standing. Hakabinyan mutar. But if it's exactly the same, that would imply that it's mutar. And therefore, we would be back to a case where it is kosher again. Okay? So, okay, so now now the next Mishnah is going to continue on with the case of with more cases of lavud. This is also very, this is relevant if anybody's, trying to plan out their sukkah. This is, this is for this coming year. This is relevant for you.
So Rabbi, just to conclude the previous piece, so we're saying the maskana is that 50-50 is good, and you don't need more omed as opposed to breach. Like,
yes,
that's according to Rav Papa, not Rav Huna.
Correct.
Okay, just want to get it straight. Okay, yes. Thank you.
Yes. So then there's still which we'll get to in a bit. There's a question of the Gemara will talk about something called Efshar L'Tzamtzem. Is it actually possible to determine things precisely? Can you ever find a case where it's exactly 50?
Right.
50-50. So we've had to determine whether or not that's possible to find. We'll get to that machlok out of Efshar L'Tzamtzem later. But yes, assuming you can create the situation, it'll be fine. It'll be fine in class like a papa.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So akivin shlosha chavalon zel mal mizeh vezel mal mizeh bevad shlo yehei bechevel lechavero shlosha tzachim. So now you're building. You want to build a wall out of rope. So you do it with three of them. As long as the gaps between one rope and another rope is less than 3 tvachim. Shiur chavalim v'ovyan yatral tavach kadosh kedei shehei hakol 10 tvachim. So that means that the combined width of all the ropes must be more than a tefach, because otherwise you wouldn't hit 10 tvachim in total. Makifim makanim, and also said you're going to do it by doing it with reeds instead, or with boards. Right, so you do the same thing with sticks or boards, as long as the gap between them is also less than 3. Right. So yes, we did the first get chavalim is diagram number 228. Then the 6 is diagram 229. Right, and right. Okay, so both those vertical horizontally. So make sure you have the right. You don't have 2 big gaps. So now the question is, when do we allow you to do these sorts of things? So, B'shayara dibru, Rabbi Yehuda says always have before about allowing you to do the string wall or this stick wall. It's only in the case of a caravan, right? A shara, it's like a special kula for a shara. Right? The say no, they didn't talk about the case just for a caravan. They were talking about for everybody in general cases, right? Hova in the present reality. Okay. So now there's another opinion. Kol mechitza she'ena shel shativ v'shel erev and mechitza divrei Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. So now, according to Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, and then son of Rabbi Yehuda, he says that if you didn't both have it horizontal and vertical, right? That's diagram number 230, and it is no good. And then you can't have it only be vertical or be horizontal. It needs to be both. Oh, the Chacham say no, either vertical or horizontal. There's no need to have it crisscross. All you need to do is make sure that we're basically just doing love all the way across, whether vertical or horizontal. Gemara. Amar Hanuna Amarav Hare Amru Omed Merubal Aparos Bishti Have Omed. So Eruvin said in Marav, they said that if you have the majority more standing than in breach, when you're talking about in the vertically, right? Sorry, right. That's when it's good, right? So we see the case, right? The case you see there of the sticks seems very clear that, right, that majority a gap, but we allow it to work. So that's by means of lavud for the parts all made. So, but as in by Rav Hamnuna, but Erev Meyer, it's a Shati Erev, right? So Shati is vertical, and Arav is horizontal. So, but as far as that's what the actual terms technically mean. When it says Shati, it means the warp, and when it says Arav, it means the woof. So that's if anybody here has ever happened to have learned how to how to weave clothing with a loom, that's these would be familiar terms. If not, that's okay.
So some of the information today is useful, some less so.
Yes. So then, right. So it's useful to know kind of how it's saying, if you're saying port and stir on a boat, which ways they mean. But as in you can also say, but in this case, vertical and horizontal is easier, so I'll be translating those terms as that, just so we don't get confused. Because we're not currently dealing with we're not currently in Masechet Shabbos dealing with weaving. So Amar Abai, which way is it? So do we apply parts of Balamed only vertically or horizontally as well? And also again with lavud vertically or horizontally. So now we're trying to find proof. So Abai says, Tashma. So right, so we're learning that based on the Mishnah that the chavalim must be altogether one tefach and a little more than tefach. So that way, altogether, we'll end up having more than 10 for the height. So if we really thought that paratz merubal omed is fine, then what do you need that extra tefach for? Le'abed pachot mishlosha v'chevel mashu, pachot mishlosha chevel mashu, pachot me'arba chevel mashu. Instead, couldn't you simply build it differently? You'll have it slightly less than 3, slightly less than 3, slightly less than 4, and then slightly less than 3. In terms of, right, so let's see, here we go. That's in the here. So in the case of here, so that would be these don't have the exact number. Basically, it would be so you'd have 3 where the aleph is, then where the next aleph is, that'd be 4, and then 3 on the bottom, right? So why don't you simply do that? So, right, so why couldn't you do that instead? So, because for us, this really, how could that ever, why would you think if you had one of the gaps was 4 and we have very thin strings, how would that ever work? Right, to do a little bit, so how could that possibly work to do it that way? Whoever said that if it's less than 4, that this is going to work, between 3 and 4, who says that works? If you want to say that the bottommost part is 4, then we've got the problem of that's where the goat's coming right on through. And if it's the uppermost part, then we've got the problem with the air coming through from this side and that side, and we're also stuck. If you want to say it's the middle in the middle section, then we have the problem of there being majority standing versus that which is in breach, but the breach is bigger than that which is standing on both sides, which is a problem. So shmat mina omed merubal pars v'sheiruchot have omed. So then we should have learned out from there that if you have omed merubal pars, even though the gap is wider than the walls, then it should be fine. So Ella, but that's not the case, right? So Ella Rahamnuna Hazik come by. This is what it means to say. Kigon Aiti Machzela Tahave Shiva Omashu. Rather, one brought a mat that was 7 and a little bit. Okay, so that's here we go. That's diagram number 234. Okay, so before again, they were saying the problem of the issue is the middle one's too big. That means that it is greater than the surroundings. Now we're having a case basically where you have a where we've got like a total 10 tefachim. We hang a mat that's 7 and a little bit in the middle there. Okay, so that way we'll have a breach on the bottom that is less than 3, so therefore the goats aren't getting through. And then we're cutting a hole in the middle. In the middle there, that's 3. So okay, so let's read through the. Okay, we're now reading through it inside. To go into so you've got the mat that's 7 and a bit. And you cut out in the middle towards the bottom, a gap of 3. And you left on the top is 4 and a little bit. And the whole thing is standing less than 3 above the ground. Will that work or not? So Ravashi says we got a problem here in terms of about mechitza tluya. Rabbi Tavla Merav, as Rabbi Tavla asked from Rav, mechitza tluya mahu shetatir b'churba. The question of mechitza tluya, does it work or not? If you've got a hanging wall, is that a sufficient wall? So Amar lei and mechitza tluya materet el b'mayim. And we said that if it's mechitza tluya, i.e. it's exactly 3 on the bottom, that only works for water. Kal shuakil cham and mayim. Right? That the whole fact that you can have a wall that doesn't reach the bottom, we only allowed that to work for water, nowhere else. Right, so how are we saying that? If it's actually the gap here is 3, if the gap on the bottom is 3, right? That's 235. The gap on the bottom here is 3 or more. How would you say that ever works? So, So therefore we say that if you're going to be doing the case, you can't have anything being larger than 3, or at any point, whether it be on the bottom, the middle, or the top segment, when you're doing your level strings. Nowadays, actually, there's a different problem that often comes up because you have to be careful about the shita of Rav Chaim and the Chazon Ish. So actually, if anybody has any of those, the metal pop-ups, the metal sukkahs that come with the straps, you'll notice that they're actually not doing 3 strings. They're actually typically doing 4 or 5 because they're counting the bottom, the pole on the bottom. They're counting also the middle pole also. So the way they work it out is that basically you end up you have strings with distance from each other that the distance between them is less than the distance of Rav Chaim Naeh, but the total amount covered is greater than that of Chazon Ish. So just a fun note, if anybody ever notices that on their sukkah, if they have one of those metal sukkahs with the canvas wraparounds. But for exactly how to do it in your particular case, please consult for the details of a particular sukkah. That's just a fun side note. Okay. So now we're back to now we've established the size of the gaps that we're allowed to have. So now we're going back to the Mishnah about the case of if you're surrounding it with the reeds or the sticks. So Makiv Mekani. So is this only allowed for a caravan, or can everybody do it? So what's it talking about? So did we learn in Beit that all the walls of Shabbos only work for an individual's area if the area is more than Beit Zatayim, right? So that would imply that Rabbi Huda allows these things to be used for everybody, not just a share, even less than for Satayim. Meanwhile, the Mishnah seems to say he's saying that these don't work. So what's going on here? Kedamar Rav Nachman v'Tim Rav Bibi bar Abai. It's either Rav Nachman or the son of Abai stated. Lo nizvach ha'el litain lehen kol sarkan. Hachanami litain lehen kol sarkan. Rather, Yehuda's rather they're saying that Yehuda's I can say something else. He's stating that that his statement is meant to be helpful for the caravan, but it wasn't really meant to be addressing the case of anybody else besides just the caravan. So you shouldn't bring contradiction for something that's not talking about a caravan because he wasn't talking about anything besides just a caravan. So where is what they say stated that the point of Rabbi Yehuda is to support the caravan, not to exclude the individual. It's on this based on the Mishnah, where it states, so we learn out the Mishnah, which states that any wall that is not vertical and horizontal is considered to be a wall. That's Rabbi Yehuda, name Rabbi Yehuda. So, right, so where does that come from? So Mia Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Hachi. When does he say that? Hatanya Echayaka Vechat Sher Al Chavalim. Didn't he say elsewhere that right? So that whether for individual or a share, they can use ropes. Ma ben yachid l'share. So there's between the individual's walls and that of a caravan. Yachid notin lo Beit satayim. Shnayim notin lahen Beit satayim. Shlosh nasu she'arav notin lahen ad lahen Beit shesh. So basically, the question is how much area you're allowed to enclose. So if there's one or two people, you get until Beit satayim's worth. But if there's three, if they become a caravan, you get up to 6 Beit sat. The very that's his opinion there. They get the whole area that they're allowed to, however much they need for the purpose for their needs. That's how big they get. The main point is that that's fine as long as there will not be an unoccupied place, and within it that's about Beit Satayim. Right, so that's what the total area is. Just so you can't have, like let's say most of them had an immense amount of stuff. So it will be fine as long as you don't leave a gap in the middle of the area where you're laying on your stuff. That's more than Beit Sa, than a Beit Sa. So Amar of Nachman v'Timur Bibi bar Abai lo nizraka ela leitan lahen kol sarkan. Right. So rather, what is the purpose of that whole Mishnah? So that's why they say that it's that's where Rav Nachman and Rav Bibi initially stated that it's that the purpose of the wall limitations is talking about giving them enough space for whatever they need. Dash Rav Nachman Mishum Rabbeinu Shmuel. So now we've got another statement like some Rabbeinu about the the maximal distance for that to enclose. So Yachid notin a little bit at time. Individual gets 2 Beit Sash. 9 notin a little bit at time. 2 people get Beit Satayim. Shlosha nasu sharav notin lahen Beit shesh. And if there's 3, then it goes. Then they get 6. They become a caravan. They get 6 Beit. They get a total of 6 Beit Sa. Right. So Shavaka Rabbanan of the Vavad to Rabbi Yossi Yehuda. Wait, so does that mean, did you just state that we don't follow the Rabbanan anymore, and instead we're following Rabbi Yehuda? So instead we read Darshan as follows. Hadar Ukim Rav Nachman Amora Alei B'Darash. He said Rav Nachman had said he made a mistake and had somebody help him explain. Darim Shamarti Lifnechem Ta'ud Hein V'Yadi. I made a mistake. Baram Kacha Amru. This is what it should have stated. Yachid Not Nil Beit Satayim. Individual gets 2 Beit Sa. Shnayim Notnim Lahen Beit Satayim. 2 people, they also get Beit Satayim. Shlosha Naso Shev Not Lahen Kol Sarkan. Right, and 3. Right, it's not limited. They get 6. Rather, instead, they get as much as they need, and that's that. Okay, so we're gonna pause here, and then we're gonna be, and tomorrow we're gonna analyze this statement here about whose opinion is the limit of distance. So to summarize, today we covered talking about a shara and a caravan and its encampment, as well as and parts merubal omed, majority standing, parts merubal omed and omed merubal parts, majority standing versus minority standing, right? Whether the majority of stuff is in breach or not in breach. We also discussed how we deal with leveled walls, walls of strings, walls of sticks, and the gaps in between. We discussed about the area paralleling and the maximal size, and then we started talking about the maximum area that you can enclose and still consider it to be a reshut yachid, based on the number of people as well. So that's it for today. If we have any questions, feel free to ask them. If anybody has to go, that's it for today.
All right, thank you.
Right there.